Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Catholics, Orthodox Christians, all who were wondering what's going on in the world. So, apparently, the Society of St. Pius X, the SSPX, or as in Europe it's called the SSPX. Anyways, it was, for those who don't know, it was founded by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre in the late 70s, I believe, with the approval of the local bishop of Fribourg and Rome, actually, and then he founded a seminary, again, with the approval of Rome. Anyways, it's a big, long story, and then, of course, because you were teaching the solid, unchangeable Catholic faith and they adhere to the immemorial liturgy of the Roman Rite, Rome said, you guys got to stop and conform. Actually, they tried to pressure Lefebvre, telling him, you know what, you can continue with your project, which we originally said is okay, as long as you actually just say the new liturgy only once, and then you can go ahead and do whatever you want. And out of principle, he said no. And Archbishop Lefebvre was, if you listen to him, is actually, the way he speaks in French, very gentle. But he was like Jesus, gentle but tough. So he called the rite of Paul VI, because that's actually what it is. Your regular Mass is not the Roman Rite. It's not the traditional Roman Rite. It was invented in the 1960s, fabricated, as Pope Benedict XVI himself said. He called it an artificial fabrication, a banal on-the-spot product. That's what Benedict XVI, when he was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Joseph Ratzinger, called it, because that's exactly what it is. They took the old rite, tore a whole bunch of it, reformed the whole thing, not just the Mass, all the sacraments, baptism, confirmation, all of them. So to fabricate them, to make them more ecumenical, meaning less Catholic, meaning less apostolic, meaning less Christian. So he called the new Mass the bastard rite. It sounds very, very horrible to us. How can you call the Mass a bastard rite? Well, his thinking is that, okay, well, you married Christianity, Catholicism, with heresy, Protestantism. You married Orthodoxy with heresy, and to like the true Mass, like the way the Society of St. Pius speaks of the true sacraments and the true Mass, meaning they received rites of the Catholic Church. So you married the apostolic liturgies with heretical liturgy, and then you had the bastard kid, bastard child, and that is the rite of Paul VI. Anyways, so in 1988, they were with negotiations with Rome for decades, pretty much for years and years and years, about the status of the society. They were first suspended, and there was no excommunication, but they were kind of operating with their priests and him as Archbishop Lefebvre as their bishop for a long time, out of the not explicit approval of Rome. Like, they were kind of like, okay, nobody was getting excommunicated, but they were not technically in illicit, and as they say these days, in a regular canonical order, meaning canonical is law. Let me just get a sip here. A regular canonical order. And there are books, if you're interested in the whole saga. Michael Davies wrote a trilogy, actually a quadrilogy. I don't know how it's said, 4 volumes. It's the first, originally was the trilogy, was the, well, he has actually several trilogies. The trilogy on, if you're just interested in the Society of St. Pius X situation, it's called the Apologia pro Marcel Lefebvre. Apologia pro Marcel Lefebvre. Originally it was 3 volumes, and it is 3 volumes. It shows you 3 books, big books on the whole saga. And then volume 4 was, as I recall, I have all books, was all the correspondence up to, because in 1988, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre decided, because he was sick, he was dying, and he noticed that his endless negotiations with Rome were going nowhere. Rome would promise him, okay, fine, we'll give you a bishop. Oh, no, we won't. And then he gives him somebody who wants him to be a bishop. He said, no, not that guy. And he noticed, like, this play over decades that he is being played. He lost confidence in Rome, justifiable or unjustifiable. I cannot judge. But after somebody's been betrayed for decades, you can understand his mental state. He said, no, that's it. I'm getting played here. First, he actually finally agreed with Rome to, they had an agreement that they would allow the Society of St. Pius X to have a bishop with the approval of the Pope, Pope John Paul II. And then he said, okay, fine, we need to have the consecration done within this certain period. Well, let's delay. Well, let's have a look. Oh, well, the time isn't appropriate. So Archbishop Lefebvre, after he signed the agreement within a day or two, reneged on it. Reneged because he thought, well, okay, now, what are they doing? They're waiting for me to die before they give an approval, which of course will never happen. So he ended up consecrating 4 of his priests as bishops of Society of St. Pius X. And they were the Bishop Tissier de Malaret, you can see him over there, and then Richard Williamson next to him, and then Bishop Fillet, who was the head of the Society of St. Pius X for quite a while, and Bishop de Galareta, I think that's how you say his name. He's from Argentina. So these were the 4 consecrated bishops. And now Richard Williamson is dead, passed away just recently. Bishop Tissier de Malaret, again, just passed away recently. And now what's left is the Bishop Fillet and Bishop de Galareta, which is the youngest one. But again, they're getting old. They're becoming old men. And the Society of St. Pius had, 600-700 priests. And I don't know, like how many seminaries, 3 seminaries, 4 seminaries. How can 2 bishops be able to deal with all of that? Ordinations, confirmations, visitations. It's almost impossible. And the way the Archbishop Lefebvre did it, he said, look, we're not schismatic here. I'm not giving jurisdiction to these bishops. These are all the function of these bishops is not to rule as in a diocesan bishop. He's ruling part of the church against the Pope. So he is actually taking territory, ruling it without the papal mandate, as the modern state of the church is. Because in the ancient past, you didn't need a papal mandate to consecrate a bishop. The cathedral chapter would choose, or the people even in the city would choose the man they want to be their bishop, and he would be consecrated as bishop with other bishops coming from neighboring towns, consecrating him, and that's an end of story. That's it. That's their bishop. Again, in the ancient past, nobody sent a letter to the Pope saying, hey, we chose this guy as a bishop. No, it was done. It was chosen by the people, by the cathedral clergy, and that was it. That was it. Later, they would just inform the Pope, okay, yeah, that man was consecrated a bishop, and unless he was a heretic, no Pope would object. So nobody had to wait, okay, let's wait for the Roman congregations to choose for us a man and install him as bishop. That's a modern development. Anyways. So yeah, he said, look, I'm not giving them jurisdiction here. All I'm doing is providing for my priests. I'm providing for the faithful. When I'm dead, who's going to take care of these people? When I'm dead, who's going to consecrate priests to serve these people who are hungering for the ancient liturgy, for pure, solid Catholic doctrine without modernism and heresy? Who is going to do it? If I'm dead, I'm going to hope and pray that some bishop will come and help them out. So he decided finally in 1988, you know what, I'm waiting no longer. The Pope likes it. The Pope doesn't like it. This is a state of emergency. I'm going to die pretty soon. And he actually died, 2, 3, 4 years later, something like that. I can't remember. He said, I can't wait anymore. That's it. I have to. Out of conscience, I have to provide for the Christian Catholic faithful. So he said, look, these bishops will be just dispensers of the sacraments, basically. Those who can ordain, consecrate, give sacrament confirmation without jurisdiction. So he was not making a schismatic act, but just providing for the people. And he was joined by Bishop Bishop de Castro Meyer from Brazil, and his assistant priest, who is now the head of the St. John Vianney, basically almost a semi-diocese in Brazil, fully traditional, recognized by Rome because they reached a final kind of a regularization with Rome. At that time, just to be clear, at that time I was extremely against Archbishop Lefebvre doing these consecrations. I loved his work. I loved the priests. I loved preserving the ancient rites because it is our heritage. It is apostolic. It is not some invention, some fabrication in the 1960s. But I was kind of a bit immature at the time, said, okay, that's it. He defied the Pope. He's going to hell. That's it. That was my thinking at that time. He defied the Pope. He's going to hell. He consecrated. I was crying, actually, literally crying in 1988. Like, okay, I wanted them so much to reach an agreement with Rome, and I thought his decision to do that was very bad. I changed my mind since then. But the fruits of this consecration were the birth of all these traditionalist Catholic orders. The Fraternity of St. Peter came out of his priests. There are several others. Even like basically, first of all was the Fraternity of St. Peter. Then there was, several other traditional orders came out of the bosom of this consecration into Rome. And actually, he is the man who saved the traditional Roman rite. He is Archbishop Lefebvre. So every traditional organization, order, actually should thank him and consider him a saint for standing firm, like St. Athanasius stood firm even against the Pope in proclaiming the truth and holding on to what has always been taught and handed and practiced. This is St. Vincent of Lerins, who actually whose words are perverted by Jorge Bergoglio, also known as Pope Francis, into saying that whose whole work, I have a review of his book on my channel, is against every novelty and every innovation and adhering to what has always been taught by all, everywhere, and always. That is his standard. And he talks about what happens, some part of the church goes into novelty. What do we do? What happens if a lot of the church goes into novelty? What do we do? Simple answer, we hold on to what has always been taught, what has always been practiced by all and everywhere. Now this is an article from La Porte Latine, which is a Society of St. Pius X website, official website in France. And it is an article published February 17th, 2025 and the author is not some nobody priest, but I'll show you at the bottom here. Here. It's by Abbot or Father Jean-Michel Glise, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. So he is the professor of apologetics, ecclesiology, and dogma at the seminary of the Society of St. Pius X in Écon, Switzerland. So he's the main contributor to this magazine, Courrier de Rome. And he participated in the doctrinal discussions between Rome and the Fraternity of St. Pius X between 2009 and 2011. And several times, actually, during the pontificate of Pope Benedict XVI, they were very close to an agreement. But unfortunately, at that time, Cardinal Gerhard Müller, who is head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, would throw a wrench into the agreement. And you have to accept Vatican II. It's like, okay, what do you want us to accept in Vatican II? Give us specifics. But he would just basically throw a wrench into it and ruined any possible reconciliation. So, of course, now, I think a few years ago, Jorge Bergoglio, also known as Pope Francis, gave or conceded to the Society of St. Pius X. He validated all their marriages and their confessions. So how can they be in schismatic and in schism? And Benedict XVI, again in 2009, annulled, basically not lifted, but he annulled the decree of 1988, in which it was not a decree, it was a decree of the church saying that, well, Archbishop Lefebvre and Bishop de Castro-Meyer and all the bishops consecrated by them are automatically by law excommunicated. So it was not the Pope excommunicating. No, it was saying, well, the law says you had to have a permit from Peter to consecrate bishops, but you didn't get the permit, so unfortunately you're excommunicated automatically, by law. So, of course, Society of St. Pius X had books on the subject saying, well, no, this is a state of necessity. We look at Assisi, where paganism was ranked on the same level as Christianity, and the Buddha was worshipped in churches in Italy. So at that time, saying, look, this is a state of necessity, as I explained at the beginning. So your law, it does not apply. And actually, they had a code in the Code of Canon Law itself. There was a state of saying that these laws do not apply. The state of automatic excommunication would not apply, even if, first of all, if the person consecrating or those receiving the consecration or these penalties will not apply, if they truly believed that there was a state of necessity, that they themselves believed it to be true, even if it is not true. So even if it is not true, but they believe that it is true, that penalty of automatic excommunication would not apply. So that is, again, do you think Archbishop Lefebvre was a liar? He actually didn't believe in a state of necessity and seeing with the world around him. And everything but tradition was elevated. Everything is good except Catholic tradition. So anyways, so this is a brief of what happened. So here's the article. So the article is basically setting up people to consecrations of new bishops for the Society of St. Pius X are coming. And they're probably coming very soon. Because, again, they said many times, the Fraternity of St. Pius X, saying, look, we're negotiating with Rome. We'll try to get a permit from Rome. We don't want to, because now the so-called excommunications were, the decree itself was annulled by Pope Benedict XVI, which meant that the excommunication of Archbishop Lefebvre was gone, of Bishop de Castro-Meyer was gone, of all four bishops was gone. Of course, Bishop Williamson was kind of basically left the Society of St. Pius X, and he did consecrate several other bishops in England separately. Anyways, yeah, I lost my train of thought. So yeah, he annulled them. So basically, Archbishop Lefebvre, because I hear a lot, he lifted the excommunication on the four bishops. No, Archbishop Lefebvre is, because they simply just annulled the whole decree. The whole decree was null and void. That's it. So basically, any declaration of the automatic excommunication is disappeared, vanished, poof, gone, deleted. So they're setting up people, and the Society of St. Pius X for a long time said, look, we're going to try to get, Pope Francis to give us permission to ordain, because he validated our marriages, our confessions, and our churches, basically. So, and hopefully he'll give us permission to consecrate a few more bishops, because we're just too big to handle at the moment. But now Francis Jorge Bergoglio is in hospital and most likely to die very soon. And I've actually been struggling to pray for him. And actually, my only prayer for him is that he, through his sickness and suffering, he will wake up and God will give him the grace of repentance. Repentance for all the evil he has done to his people, to his church, to his faithful bishops and priests and nuns and monks, for his perversion of the faith, for his honoring of evil men. I've done that a lot of videos where he actually honored the artist in person who took a crucifix of Jesus Christ with the body of Christ, a crucifix, so the body of Christ is on the cross. And he peed, this artist peed in a jar and put the crucifix into his urine, into the artist's urine. And Francis greeted him, gave him the thumbs up. So Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, honored the so-called artist whose art is peeing on Jesus Christ. And he honored paganism. So my whole prayer is he repents so he does not go to eternal punishment, eternal hell, where the worm does not die. So that's my hope for him. Even though it's hard even to hope for this, but let's not be mean and evil, because God himself does not wish the death of sinners. So even against my human nature, I have to wish him that at least he repents and and escapes hell, basically. So now they have this article about, get the faithful ready for new priests and new bishops to be consecrated. And he explains, we're not giving jurisdiction. This is Lumen Gentium and the Vatican II kind of combined. Okay, you consecrate a bishop, automatically has jurisdiction and order, and the power of order, the power of consecrating and ordaining and so forth. So they're setting it up. And I'm going to get to, I went to perplexity here, show you. Can Catholic bishops be ordained or consecrated when there is no pope, when there's a sede vacante, when there is no pope? And so you're officially not defying the explicit will of the pope. You're ordaining, consecrating bishops where there is no pope. How can you consecrate without papal mandate? Well, there is no pope. So obviously, unlike in 1988, you're not defying a pope who said, no, you cannot consecrate, because there is no pope to say, no, you cannot consecrate. Of course, if it is a limited time, suppose there is a break in bishops and a papal claimant like it happened in the past of years. There are no bishops going to be consecrated? Because, as I said, the so-called getting the papal mandate is a new thing. It was not in the ancient church, even in the medieval church, as I understand. Well, definitely from the ancient church, no way. And then there's actually an article by Father Z, where somebody asked him, consecration of bishops where there is no pope? I'm going to end it with these two little things. But let's actually go through the article by the Society of St. Pius X about getting ready for the consecration of new bishops. So this is no longer a rumor. This is coming from their official site, coming from a professor at their seminary who dealt with negotiations with Rome. So it's not just talk. It's getting people ready. All right, let's see. And I'll try not to go for too long. At that, so it says, at the time willed by God and fixed by prudence, by the prudence of the superior general, who is not a bishop, I can't remember, Pellegrini or whatever his name is, the priestly fraternity of St. Pius X, new consecrations are possible and necessary. Yeah, they're getting old, the bishops. What happened when you have just one left, one standing? For the common good of the church. And we've seen how Francis has treated traditional bishops in 2013, 2014, 2015. All the bishops who, even just recently in 2024, the bishop who is open to not only to traditional orders, traditionalists, but to even charismatics in France. And just because he's open to all those who are Catholic, even those who we, as a traditional Catholic, would say, there are these charismatic guys, but they had faith in Jesus Christ. So he removed him just because he was open. And he forbade the ordination of solid religious orders from taking place over there because they wanted to be ordained in the traditional rite, which this bishop was open to. He was a faithful servant of the church. But Francis, from 2013, 2014, was a hammer, a sledgehammer on all good Catholic bishops throughout the world, in Italy, in France, in South America, Latin America. So, I mean, I detailed a lot of that stuff over the years, and he was, and hopefully is no longer, an evil man, a hater of Jesus Christ. So, a deadline is coming up. My opinion is take advantage. Wait till Francis dies. Now, just to cut to the chase. Wait till Francis dies, till Jorge goes to his final reward and face his judge, the judge of the living and the dead. And he can face the Lamb seated upon the throne, who was once dead and now lives. Take advantage of that moment and consecrate a few bishops. Take advantage. Again, it might be deceivable, kind of sneaky, and trying to play around the law. But Jesus said, "Be as gentle as doves and as wise as serpents." So we have to be gentle and as wise as serpents who take advantage of a situation. Because if you consecrate bishops without papal mandate, well, there is no pope to get the papal mandate. And when the new pope is chosen, and hopefully it's Cardinal Robert Sarah, or a solid, unapologetic Catholic, God willing, then Bishop File, Bishop de Galareta, and the newly consecrated bishops go to Rome and kneel, prostrate before the newly elected pope, presenting themselves and asking for his blessing and indicating that they recognize him as pope, and they are putting themselves under his, just showing him filial love and submission. Not subjugation, but filial submission. And then basically putting the pope, the newly elected pope, in front of a matter of fact. That's the situation. These are new bishops. They did not really defy a pope because there was no pope to defy. They came to me by themselves asking for my blessing and understanding. And if it is a Cardinal Sarah, I think everything will be done and regularized. So don't, because if you wait till the new pope is elected and all the congregations start up again, and he has to put new people or remove people, and then you ask for consecration, okay, let us examine, let's have a look, let us, and then of course you have the various voices. No, they do not allow them to consecrate bishops. Oh no, these people are too conservative. Oh no, these are against Vatican II, whatever the hell that means. Oh no, they reject the new mass of Saint Paul VI, who destroyed all the Roman Rite, the destroyer of the Roman Rite. So all these voices will come and interfere with even a good pope who would want to allow the consecration of bishops. So don't allow, my advice to society, St. Pius X, do not allow this chance to go. Go ahead, consecrate bishops. You technically did not defy an explicit order of the Pope. There is no Pope to ask permission from. All the congregations are shut down. And then, after the newly elected Pope comes, go to him with all the bishops and several priests of the society. Present yourself to the hopefully real Holy Father, and hopefully, God willing, everything will be smoothed out. That's my advice. All right, let's go. Deadline coming up. So he talks about the 1988 consecrations. So he says, today, many circumstances seem to indicate that the favorable moment has once again come for new consecrations. And I explained why. They're getting old, all the errors and evils. And he mentions the Superior General that in the November-December 2024 Angelus magazine, Don David Pagliarini, Liarani, if I'm saying his name correctly, Superior General St. Pius X declared. So while evoking the recent call to God of Bishop Tissier de Malaret, which just passed recently. So obviously, Providence speaks to us through this event. It is very clear that this death, so this is what the head of the Society of St. Pius X said I'm assuming, on the death of Bishop Tissier de Malaret. He said, so obviously, Providence speaks to us through this event, the death of Bishop Tissier de Malaret. It is very clear that this death raises the question of the continuity of the work of the fraternity, because 2 more bishops are left, which now has only 2 bishops and whose mission to souls appears as necessary as ever in the times of terrible confusion that the Church is experiencing today. And today, with the reign of what Francis of Assisi called the uncanonically elected destroyer in a prophecy, is far worse than it was during John Paul II. Far worse. So he said, like, this decision to consecrate bishops would be according to the will and wisdom and hopefully inspiration of the superior of the society. So when the time comes, declared Don David, we will know how to assume our responsibilities in conscience. So the time is not set, is not exact, but this is the chance, Society of St. Pius X. This is your chance. Choose your men. At the announcement of the death of Jorge Bergoglio, the bishop dressed in white, who used to live at a hotel in the Vatican called Santa Marta, because he's not worthy of the papal palace, when at his announcement of his death, consecrate your bishops and let it be a matter of fact. And when the newly elected pope comes to office, go with all the consecrated bishops, present yourselves to him in submission and love, and show your attachment to eternal Rome, as you always say. Resumption of an argument. For the present time, we would like to indicate the properly theological reasons which would lead Catholic faithful to hesitate when the time comes, which not to we would like to indicate the properly theological reasons which would lead the Catholic faithful not to hesitate, as I did, and I was very angry in 1988, when the time comes at the hour fixed by the Superior General. These reasons have not changed since 1988. Actually, they're much worse now. At that time, we developed the various publications. So he talks about the various publications, and there's links to them, so you can actually, there's a book, actually, neither Schismatic nor Excommunicated. There's a lot of theological explanations which you can link to or search for, or you can go to the Angelus Press website and find more articles or books on the subject, which I'm not going to dwell on. So it talks about from one of the for one to the other of these 2 kinds of explanations, the theological and pastoral, we can retain and deepen the following outline, which, like those of yesterday, the possible episcopal consecrations, he doesn't say certain, but it's almost certain, of tomorrow, even if accomplished against the explicit will of the sovereign pontiff. That's why take the advantage as soon as Francis dies, consecrate bishops, then you're not going against the explicit will of the sovereign pontiff, because there is no sovereign pontiff. And B, first of all, that it's possible. Number 2, that it's necessary. And 3, without serious detriment. So he talks about, it's possible to ordain, consecrate bishops in this situation. So he says, in this sense, it is possible, even if it is generally illicit, because he recognizes it according to the current law of the church, not the ancient apostolic tradition, where the people, or at least the clergy of the cathedral, would choose their bishop. They didn't have to wait for Rome, which would take them months to send a letter to, and then another months to get a response from, and then maybe they don't like him and then send him another. No, that they chose him. People acclaimed it. They consecrated. Even in the rite of consecration, the traditional rite, watch one where I think they will ask, is there anybody here, like they're asking the people if somebody's objecting to his consecration. So which is a remnant of the ancient past, where the people, yes, claimed the chosen one. Of course, we're talking about faithful people at that time, unlike these days. We cannot take that risk these days. In this sense, it is possible, even if it is gravely illicit, which is a completely different question, for a priest reduced to the lay state to validly celebrate Mass, because he's a priest forever. So even if it is a priest who's been laicized, he's still, the priestly character is still with him, and he can still consecrate, act as a priest, because the canonical measure to which he has been subject has not taken away his priestly character. So he talks about, okay, this is true. Anyway, I'm not going to read the whole article. I will put a link for you, and just press the English translate, and you can read the whole thing in English instead of French. It is therefore possible to consecrate bishops even against the explicit will of the sovereign pontiff. So he talks about this, meaning that yes, the consecration is valid because now they are valid bishops, meaning they have the high priestly character. Because as I mentioned in the old Latin Mass videos, I'm going to try to combine them and make them, reissue them again. The same videos with more, quotes clearly, because the Christian priesthood, the order, comes from the Hebrew, the orders, the order of Aaron, where there was the Levites, which are our deacons. There were the priests, which are our priests, and there was the high priest, or the high priests. The high priests are our high priest is Jesus Christ, and those fully participating in the high priest's office are our high priests, who are the successors of the apostles, who are the bishops. So it's the same order of things. So he says, yeah, they're valid. They are true high priests. They have that power. So the validity is not in question here. The licitity, meaning it's going against the explicit law. So yeah, it's doing something not allowed in normal circumstances. But again, these are not normal circumstances. But again, as I said, mitigate this illicit act by immediately after the election of the new pontiff going directly to Rome, submitting yourselves to him, and telling him, we are not against the church, we are not against you, we love you, we love the church of God. All we're trying to do is keep the faith and practice the rites which come to us from the apostles. As the creed of the Council of Trent declares, we must. As the creed of Vatican I declares, we must. It is part of our creed, our faith, infallible declaration that we must adhere to the received, meaning traditional, apostolic rites traditionally used in the administration of the sacraments. That is in the creed of the Trent and in the creed of Vatican I. To go against that is to adhere to heresy, if not to error, if not heresy. To replace the received rites is to go against the doctrine of the faith, to go against the creed. And as I mentioned in other videos, various theologians said that even if a pope decides to do that, he would become a schismatic. All right. So anyways. So I'm not going to go read the whole thing. So he talks about the double power of episcopal power of order. So, which is the power to ordain priests, to administer sacrament of confirmation, and to consecrate bishops. These are the powers of the order of the high priesthood. On the other hand, the power of jurisdiction, which currently is handed out by the Pope, by Rome, which is the power to govern part of the church, a diocese. So this is technically only given by Rome, currently, as I mentioned previously. So basically what they're saying, so it is possible for a bishop to confer on a priest episcopal consecration the power of episcopal order, even if this consecration is accomplished against the explicit will of the Supreme Pontiff. So he admits, even if gravely illicit according to current laws, modern decision to get the approval of the Roman Pontiff, contrary to the will of the Pope, consecration necessarily remains valid. So he's saying we're not actually giving jurisdiction. We're not giving a newly ordained consecrated bishop, oh, you have the jurisdiction, official jurisdiction over the United States or over the eastern provinces of this is your jurisdiction. Then you're actually kind of going against the current setup of the bishop, Pope governing where bishops have jurisdiction or not. No, their function is simply to provide the sacraments. On the other hand, it is impossible for a bishop to confer on anyone episcopal power of jurisdiction. So that's what he's saying. Since this communication would be envisaged against the will of the Pope, because it is precisely an act of the will of the Pope which is the necessary foundation of this communication. Only the Pope can communicate to a bishop the power of jurisdiction, either immediately by himself or mediately and through another bishop delegated for this purpose, according to the current custom. As I said in the ancient past, say in Cologne in Germany, the Bishop of Cologne dies, say in the year 1000. The cathedral chapter, the priests of the cathedral will go into conclave and choose a man, one of them or somebody else, to be their bishop, to be the Bishop of Cologne. And then other bishop, when the man is chosen, if there is no objection from the priests or even themselves, they might actually even ask the people, then 3 bishops, probably from neighboring provinces or neighboring dioceses, would come and consecrate that one man as bishop. And then they might let the Pope know. So they didn't go become excommunicated or schismatic or anything like that. And traditionally, 3 bishops need to consecrate one man, one priest as bishop, not just one. One would be a total emergency if that it would be valid, but kind of against all apostolic tradition. And actually, that makes sense because this way there's absolutely no doubt of the validity of the consecration. One bishop makes a mistake. One bishop might not be totally valid. You don't know. So you got 3 bishops consecrating one man. So the validity would be certain. And that's actually universal, not only in the Roman Church. The Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox have the same custom of 3 bishops or consecrating one man. That's apostolic tradition. Okay, so this is the case if we admit the formal and radical distinction that separates the power of order and the power of jurisdiction, a distinction that has always been taught in the Church. So again, he has a link if you want to go through the article or whatever. I'm not going to do that. He actually mentions later that in Vatican II, the document states basically kind of combines you ordain a bishop automatically has jurisdiction. Jurisdiction over what? I guess, anyways, necessary. First of all, that it is possible. So question 1 was, is it possible to consecrate? Yes, it is possible. Is it necessary? So again, he quotes Archbishop Lefebvre that he says that, we find ourselves in a case of necessity. Case of necessity where paganism was practiced in the Vatican, where a CC1 and a CC2 with paganism praised, and extreme ecumenism. But of course, that was nothing compared to what Jorge Bergoglio, also known as the bishop dressed in white, Francis, did. So he says, a permanent desire. So this explanation has already been summarized a little less than a year earlier. So I guess in 1987. In a letter dated, July 8th, 1987, where that the prelate of Econ, meaning Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, had addressed to Cardinal Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI. A permanent desire to annihilate tradition is a suicidal desire, which authorizes, by that very fact, true and faithful Catholics to take all initiatives necessary for the survival and salvation of souls. So he says, basically, this is the situation these days too. A state of necessity is an extraordinary situation in which the goods absolutely necessary for natural or supernatural life are seriously compromised by circumstances. And this is the situation these days. As an aside, a couple of years ago, I visited a Coptic Orthodox church locally here because, it's like, okay, you know what, let me go meet some Egyptians. And, Egyptian Christians mostly are Coptic Orthodox, or the Oriental Orthodox, which in their liturgy, actually, they explicitly talk about the two natures of Jesus Christ, even though we think they're monophysites, meaning Jesus having one nature. No, they're just basically saying, they're distinct two, absolutely, he's totally human, totally man, and totally God, but this is without mixture or loss of properties of any of these natures, but they're combined into one nature of the Son of God, or whatever the terminology they use. But so we might say one person, they might say one nature, but they still explicitly in their liturgy talk about the two natures who are separate and distinct and have, but somehow united in one, without the mixture or admixture of the two natures, which is basically, we might say the person or so it's like, all these unnecessary complications of the fathers of the church created when it's the same faith. If look at the liturgy, it's the same doctrine of divinity. So anyways, I was just, after I went in, their liturgy was done, so we're sitting there having some tea and Egyptian tea and cookies and whatever they were having. And the priest was there, and we just, so I introduced myself, chatted with them. And one of the persons, he was basically ranting and raving about Pope Francis. Look at what this man is doing. And he was mentioning all kinds of things. So the reputation of the Catholic Church, the destruction of faith in the Catholic Church, is visible even for those who are not part of the Catholic Church. He said, well, why don't you become Coptic Orthodox? Look at this. Look at what's happening there. I said, nah, I don't want to, go into a big debate with the man. He said, I know Pope Francis. When he started complaining about Pope Francis, a Coptic Orthodox complaining about Pope Francis. I just said, I know. He's not a very good man. Not a very good pope, no. So anyways, that says as an aside. That shows you that the situation of the Catholic Church is not invisible to those outside the church. It is invisible to those Catholics who are just don't pay attention. I personally have myself started kind of ignoring most of what goes on in Rome these days. But anyways, so we went through the state of necessity. In the church, the whole body of ecclesiastical law, so all of the law, is ordered by its very definition to the preaching of the doctrine of the faith and the administration of the sacraments. That's the whole point of the law, is to preach the faith. What's the point of law with no faith? That would be like the Pharisees, basically. Again, I'm going to link the article so you can go through it. But he gets, and it says, look, since 1965, the authorities of the church, the Society of St. Pius X likes to use that term, the authorities in Rome, the authorities of the church, have imposed on them a new creed. Now, in 3 articles. So these are the 3 things which Society of St. Pius X always complains about in their negotiations with Rome. Number 1, religious liberty. Religious freedom. I'm going to just quickly mention them and then I'm give a quick explanation of what they mean. religious freedom. Number 2, ecumenism. Number 3, collegiality. So this is the new creed. Of course, they're kind of exaggerating. This is not a creed. These were 3 parts, 3 documents in Vatican II. And if you actually read Vatican II, I think Benedict XVI said, you cannot read Vatican II just simple documents or simple lines. You have to take the whole council together. That's what Benedict used to talk about, the hermeneutics of continuity. It's trying to make sense of the whole council. But when they talk about here religious liberty, parts of Vatican II talk about that the governments have a duty to protect the common good, not just public order, which the document on religious liberty talks about. So the common good, and having to suppress, say, pornography and other things for the common good. And now, is it in the common good that error be preached everywhere? No. But in the document on religious liberty, it talks about you can stop this religious freedom for the public order, like if this freedom is causing disturbance in the public order. It doesn't talk about the common good. And Michael Davies has a book on religious liberty. You probably can find it on the Angelus Press. It talks about the traditional understanding of the church is, first of all, you never impose your religion on somebody. That's not what it here means. And the big objection to this document is that it seems to say, well, you have the right to believe and to preach error. And the tradition of the church is error has no rights. Evil has no rights. It might exist, the church might allow it for the common good, because trying to suppress evil or suppress false doctrine might cause worse consequences than allowing it in certain cases, especially in, where there's a big portion of the population who adheres to this error. Trying to suppress it will cause civil war. Do you want that? No. So you allow it. You grant it, you concede to it. Not liberty as a right, but liberty as a prudent measure. So you cannot go overboard with these criticisms of Vatican II. Now it talks about ecumenism. Again, ecumenism as it is practiced these days is condemned at Vatican II. Ecumenism means, let's not dwell on what divides us. Let's kind of unite. Let's not, condemn each other's errors or point them out. Let's focus on what's important. This is the ecumenism actually condemned at Vatican II. Vatican II calls this sort of ecumenism false ecumenism. It calls it false Irenicism, which was condemned by, I think, Pius XI. And I dealt with it. I said Vatican II. I have my several videos on Vatican II, which you can probably find. I quoted quite a bit. So again, let's not say ecumenism is what Vatican II brought as it is practiced today. Because as it is practiced today, where doctrine is watered down and ignored, the differences are ignored, that's actually condemned by Vatican II. Third, collegiality. Again, how do you understand that? Vatican II, the way the Society of St. Pius X would say, well, look, now the Pope is nobody. He has to have the College of Bishops always agreeing to whatever he says. That's not true, because there was an explanatory note, I think in Lumen Gentium or something, Paul VI put it in there, that basically the College of Bishops is acting under the Pope, and it has to agree with the Pope, and it cannot do things without the Pope. Basically, the Pope is the head, he's the center. And again, a bit of a thing with those who condemn any kind of a sort of cooperation of the bishops with the Pope is false, because St. Peter was not a dictator. As Benedict XVI said, the Pope is not an absolute monarch whose will is law. That's what Benedict XVI has said. But many hyper-papalists would say, well, no, the will of the Pope is law. Then the will of Francis is law. Submit to it. No, the Pope is subject to tradition, subject to doctrine of the faith, subject to to Jesus Christ, subject to Scripture. And if you look at the early church, yes, Peter was the leader. Yes, Peter he always spoke first, even at the First Council of Jerusalem in the book of Acts. James says, as Peter says, bam, 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 bam. So you see, yes, he was not like a dictator, but he was the leader. So there's primacy of the Bishop of Rome. But and things, he cannot rule as a dictator. So he has to talk with his brother successors of the apostles. And in this way, if one gives legitimate freedom to various patriarchates in the East, legitimate freedom in running their own patriarchates, their own territories, in unimportant or just things which concern them. For greater issues, for heretical, for doctrinal problems, then Rome would be intervening. This is the traditional way. And the final say would be Rome, would be the Pope. So so in this case, if this would actually be advanced and with clear explanation of what the church teaches, then I would believe that there would be a full restoration of communion amongst all the successors of the apostles, East and West, under the headship, under the leadership of the successor of Peter, as it was in the ancient church. And that's what I really hope for. So he says here, since 1969, they have also imposed on them the Reformed liturgy, as I call it, the deformed liturgy, with a new Mass in the Protestant spirit and sacraments renovated, deformed again, in an ecumenical sense. And this is not the opinion of the Society of St. Pius X. This is not the opinion of traditionalists, radical traditionalists. No, this is exactly what Annibale Bonini, himself the author and architect of the new liturgies of the Church, himself said in his book, The Memoirs of His Liturgical Reform. He said, we removed every stumbling block to our separated brethren, meaning the Protestants, not the Orthodox who adhere to the ancient rites. No. Too much devotion to Mary, let's reduce it. Too much mention of the saints, let's remove them. Too much talk about penance and suffering and hell and damnation and judgment, let's remove that to the modernists. He himself said that. The deformer of the rites. So it's as a matter of fact. So he says, these popes have imposed on the faithful the serious errors of neo-modernism already condemned by their predecessors. Faced with this generalized Protestantization, hereticalization, every Catholic faithful in the Church must react. So this is basically what, we cannot just go with the flow when it comes to the faith. We have to hold on to what was delivered, the deposit of faith. Like as St. Paul says, you have to hold on to what I handed on to you. Do not deviate from the deposit. And the word deposit of faith is not, again, a Roman Catholic thing. I've listened to Coptic Orthodox priests talking about the deposit, which we have received, the deposit of faith. So it is that's what the apostles gave us. That's the deposit. That's the faith. You don't deviate from what you have received. Unfortunately, I think the vast majority of all the difference between the Oriental Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox and Catholics are because at that time a lot of the theology was in Greek. All the councils were in Greek. So the Latins might have a certain way of speaking which differed from the Greeks, and the Greeks had a different way, of course, different than the Copts, who didn't really, they did speak Greek and they're more intellectual, but again, there are various terminologies and words, and saints used kind of vaguenesses, like Saint Cyril of Alexandria. I mentioned his book before, not his book, but it was talking about how he actually communicated with the Bishop of Rome, saying, okay, popes, my brother bishop in Rome, talk about this Nestorius over there, condemn him. And so to talk to the Pope, telling him, condemn Cyril. And so they're all going to the Bishop of Rome. Because remember, Alexandria is Epistrine See. It is like Antioch. First Jerusalem, Peter was the head until James took over. Antioch, Peter was the head, first bishop of Antioch. Rome, Peter was the head, died there. And Alexandria, in a sense, Peter was the head because he sent Mark, his disciple, as who became the bishop of Alexandria, Mark the apostle, Mark the author of the book of Mark, Bishop Mark. So I just hope for the end of the stupidity where we're bickering about words and theological understanding. Like, sometimes they're not contradiction, but they're different points of view or different emphasis of certain points. Anyways, but that's, who am I? I'm nobody. So he says, look, the transmission of the faith requires the preaching of true doctrine. And of course, condemning the errors which are opposed to that true doctrine. And the sanctification of souls requires the administration of, against the society's thought of the true sacraments, meaning the traditional sacraments. The sacraments made filled to the traditional rites. Why? Because they embody the faith once for all delivered to the saints. And of course, and the society likes to denounce the distortions of the same. So not just talk about remaining faithful, but condemn what is wrong. And let us note well this well. Everything is connected from beginning to the end because everything rests on the correct assessment of the state of necessity. So it says, look, if you actually admit there is a state of necessity, so what the Society of St. Pius did and what Archbishop Lefebvre did in the past, it's all acceptable, all legitimate, all necessary. But of course, if you choose it, no, what state of necessity? Everything is perfect. The church is flourishing. The doctrine is preached everywhere. There is no error. There is no evil. Everything is, it's the springtime of Vatican II. Everything is great. Of course, then everything which, all the, or consecrating new bishops or, setting up parishes without, or churches without the approval of the bishops, all of these are evil, they're errors, they're not necessary, they're horrible. So, it depends on how you're looking at it. So he says, point 3 is out without serious detriment. If consecrations are necessary, gravely and urgently to safeguard the common good of the church, they are licit. So, but if they're not, if the church is doing fantastic, and then, of course, there is no necessity. So, again, I'm going to link the article. Episcopal consecration, if understood as we have done above, as the ritual communication of the episcopal power of order alone, is not when it is performed against the explicit will of the Pope. I said, that's why I do it when he's dead. And intrinsically morally evil and illicit act. Intrinsically, it is not. It can be and is so when it amounts to an act of disobedience, which happens ordinarily and in most circumstances. So he admits that fact. But intrinsically, it is not so. I'm trying to avoid reading everything here. Because of the circumstances of a state of necessity where consecration is the unique, meaning the only or privileged means of resisting an abuse of power on the part of the Pope of the present hour. So that would make it necessary. This is so because the act of episcopal consecration communicates of itself the power of order alone. So, for example, if a bishop consecrates or ordains a man as a deacon, as a priest, the priest does not get jurisdiction over parish automatically. No, but he is a priest. He can go to his house and consecrate the bread and wine, and it is valid. He is a priest. He has that power of order. But he does not have the power of jurisdiction over a church, over a parish yet. So here he says, episcopal consecration communicates of itself the power of order alone, not the power of jurisdiction, which only the Pope can give by reason of a properly divine right. That is the way things are now, but in the past, when a bishop, say, was consecrated at a cathedral, say in France, in Lyon, the Bishop of Lyon died, the cathedral chapter joins, 500, 700, 800 years ago, 900 years ago. They join in, the cathedral chapter chooses a man to be bishop, they bring bishops from other parts, they consecrate him as the bishop, he got the power, but he was chosen specifically for the church in Lyon. So he would get the jurisdiction of the church in Lyon, because he was specifically chosen for that for that specific church. So in this case, though, we're not giving anybody authority over any churches or over any territory. We need men who ordain priests, who can do confirmations and so forth. Against such a right, there is no valid reason. Indeed, to communicate against the will of the Pope to a bishop or whatever. I'm just going to read the objections, old and new. Some will simply deny the state of the necessity of consecrations. Well, there is no need, everything is good. These are the supporters of the thesis of Joseph Ratzinger, which is Benedict XVI, which basically said, Vatican II is perfect, everything is fine, just people don't understand it. It's the council of the media, which Benedict XVI said. He condemned what people understand as Vatican II as a false council, as the council of the media, council of TV, council of the newspapers. It's not the real council. But as soon as he died, or actually as soon as he gave up the power for governance of the office of Peter without actually giving up the office, as he himself said in his last audience, that his renunciation did not revoke what he received in 2005. Riddle me that, Batman. He said Francis came in and basically he said, you know what, your council of the media is my council. I, who'd never participated at Vatican II, unlike you, Benedict XVI, who were one of the main experts at the council, you, Benedict, who were one of the architects of Vatican II, don't understand really Vatican II. I, Jorge Bergoglio, understand it far more than you. And it is the council of the media. It is the true council. And the words of the council are just the beginning points. We're going to go way beyond them. And that's actually a letter of Cardinal Ottaviani under Paul VI wrote to the bishops of the Catholic Church in 1966 or so, basically condemning those who basically ignore the letter of the council. They say, well, the letter is like a letter, that's just the beginning. We're going to go far beyond what it says here. That was condemned under Paul VI, actually, by Cardinal Ottaviani, a premier traditionalist who wrote his attack on the new rite of Mass of Paul VI, the Ottaviani intervention, in cooperation with Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. So of these, moreover, in conformity with the new ecclesiology of Lumen Gentium, episcopal consecration communicates uniformly the two powers of order and jurisdiction. That's true only, like as I was mentioning in the case, say in the past, where like the cathedral chapter would specifically choose a man for that city to be their bishops, and the consecration would be automatically, he's bishop and the head of that diocese, the head of that church in Lyon, church in Cologne, church in wherever, Salisbury, wherever. And this is why because according to them, any consecration of bishops automatically is you're giving them jurisdiction. That's why in their heads, even though that's not true, in their heads, this is a schismatic act. So it would automatically be illicit and schismatic. So that's why that's in their head. So he talks again about other things, but I'm not going to dwell on them. So he ends by saying, whatever the case may be, of these diverse reactions, the consecrations will benefit all, which basically tells you it's going to happen. Sooner or later, it's going to happen. So take advantage after the death of Francis, and without having to go against the explicit will of the Pope, without having to deal with congregation of bishops or anything like that. Consecrate bishops. New Pope is elected, go to Rome, submit yourselves to him, and work things out. by giving the Holy Church of God the means of its indefectibility for the greater glory of God and salvation of souls, at the time willed by God and fixed by the prudence of the Superior General of the fraternity. So, I guess this was originally published in January 2025 in the Courrier de Rome, and then republished in the La Porte Latine, February 17th, 2025. And I asked Perplexity, which is an AI thing, can a Catholic bishop be ordained or consecrated when there is no pope? So the answer is, so we're almost done here. Catholic bishops can be ordained or consecrated when there is no pope alive, but the situation is complex and subject to certain restrictions. During a period of sede vacante, empty seat, when there is no living pope, episcopal consecrations, of course, that assuming that Francis is or is pope. So appointments are typically suspended out of custom. This means that the new selections of bishops are put on hold until a new pope is selected. That's why I said go ahead and do it, citing St. Pius X, because otherwise you're going to have to deal with, no, we don't like this man, or we prefer this man, and maybe not, we don't want 2 or 4 consecrations. How about you just do 1 consecration? And we're going to deal with a lot of garbage. So do it now when there is no pope, there is no congregation of bishops. When it's done, put them in front of the state of fact, matter of fact. Okay, this is they're consecrated. We're here. We're not schismatic. We submit to you. We hope to be regularized while keeping all of our faculties and all of our rights and traditions and freedom to preach the faith and celebrate the ancient liturgy. And maybe go back to the pre-1955 liturgy, Society of St. Pius X. Okay? Anyways, before the novelties introduced by Bernini under Pius XII. All right. So he gives examples. You can put it in Perplexity and find the answers for that. That there were actually some consecrations happened between popes, but they were selected before the Pope died, and then the Pope died, and then or approved, and they were consecrated. Anyways, there's a few. Consecration of bishops without papal mandate is considered valid, but illicit. Again, we discussed that. This means that the rank of episcopacy is confirmed. The ordination is not carried out according to the church law. In extraordinary circumstances, such as during times of persecution or when communication with Rome is impossible, bishops may consecrate other bishops without papal mandate. However, they must inform Rome as soon as possible after the fact. So go ahead and do it. The requirement for papal approval, pontifical mandate for bishop consecration, is a matter of church law. As I said, it's not of apostolic tradition and not of divine ordinance. This allows for some flexibility in extreme situations. It is important to note that while consecrations without papal mandate are possible in extraordinary circumstances, they are generally avoided to maintain church unity and proper ecclesiastical order. Again, the way the Society of St. Pius X would do it, they were saying, well, we're not actually assigning any territory to anybody. So we're not becoming schismatic. We just want to provide for our faithful Catholics, for our priests, and that's all we're trying to do and keep the faith. So there's an article in Father Z's website, Father Z's blog. That's from 29 July 2022 by Father Eric Zulsdorf. Consecration of bishops when there is no pope. So somebody says, well, if Francis were to, God forbid, die tomorrow, how would that affect the rules of consecrating concerning episcopal consecrations? I saw a comment on the blog, on this blog, meaning that of Father Z, that the SSPX could likely use sede vacante periods to slip by the issue. I personally question that. Anyways, it's asking, is it possible? So Father C is kind of like He said, well, the sum of it, he said, I don't think so. He says, interesting question. We're just finishing this and we're done. If I'm not mistaken, and I hope someone will correct me if I'm wrong, in the case of the death of the Roman pontiff, episcopal appointments and are suspended. Well, there is nobody to appoint anybody, so of course, yeah, until they are reconfirmed by the election of the new Roman pontiff. Update: it seems I was wrong about this. It does now happen that in a sede vacante period, bishops are consecrated. It happened in the time between JP2 and Benedict XVI, for example. However, I used the Catholic hierarchy site to cite if between the death of Paul VI and JP2 there were consecrations, and found the gap for the period and the data entered. The same. So he talks, it happened between bishops, but I think they might have had previous approval before the death. I don't know. He says, I know of one case in which a priest was to be consecrated bishop, and then Paul VI died, which cancelled the consecration. This was not subsequently reconfirmed, and he was never consecrated a bishop. He says it could be that this involves the fact that during the sede vacante, when there is no pope, the seat is empty, periods, all offices of the Roman curia are suspended. So there is no congregation of bishops, there is none of that stuff. That would mean that the sede vacante, technically, there is no congregation of bishops. That doesn't mean that they're not locked, that the doors are locked and people don't go to work, but the actual congregation is suspended. As for the SSPX, sede vacante would not be a loophole permitting the consecration of bishops. Well, it's not a permission, it's just taking advantage of a situation. If anything, it would be the opposite, but he doesn't explain how. How is it the opposite? If I'm right, it would absolutely be the wrong time to do it. Why wait till there's a pope and the congregation of bishops is there, and then even if he desires to allow the consecration of bishops, like Benedict XVI desired the regularization of the Society of St. Pius X, but they start whispering in his ear or pressuring him against doing that, against agreeing to the selections they're giving, to delay it and extend it like we did with do you want to go through that situation one more time? That's, of course, in 1922, he says, moreover, I'm assured by a priest friend in the Society of St. Pius X that where there to be considered another consecration, that's in 1922, now we're in 2022, which would likely only be for the sake of the survival of the Society of St. Pius X. Well, the two bishops left are getting old, and it is for the survival of Society of St. Pius X. They would exhaust every avenue with Rome to obtain a mandate beforehand, as I mentioned previously. Well, that's that. That's the story. So my advice is, God has given you this chance. When there is no pope, when there is a sede vacante in Rome, when the congregation of bishops is suspended, consecrate the needed bishops for the society and for the church, of course, without giving them jurisdiction, as you explicitly state, simply to confer the sacraments on the faithful, and immediately upon the election of the new Roman pontiff, go congratulate him, submit yourselves to him, express your desire for regularization and for recognition, for your freedom to preach the truth, for your freedom to practice the faith, for your freedom to celebrate the ancient apostolic rites and work things out. That's it. That's all. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And press the notification buttons so you can get notifications whenever I do a new video. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.